Okay, I am reading a self-forgiveness list for self-control, and this is to assist myself, and I am in the middle of separation with my husband, and the previous self-forgiveness lists have helped me tremendously. So I found this self-forgiveness list at www.destiny.co.za. There is also a link in my website, www.onenessandEqualityAsLife.ning.com. If you click on the groups and look for the group called Self-Forgiveness 10x or 20x June, you can find it there. Okay. So I'm experimenting on this and see what happens. It says, I forgive myself to have allowed myself to believe that self-control is dependent on a specific resource of the brain. I forgive myself to have allowed myself to believe that self-control can diminish. I forgive myself to have allowed myself to separate myself from self-control. I forgive myself that I haven't allowed myself to accept myself as self-control. I forgive myself to have allowed myself to believe that I am able to fail to control myself. To fail to control myself in the face of temptation. I forgive myself that I have allowed temptation to control me and have power over me and power of me. I forgive myself that I haven't allowed myself to realize that in restraining impulses of temptation, I am creating a resistance to temptation, and because of the creation of resistance, that which I resist will persist, and thus the temptation actually persists when I restrain and will give in to the temptation. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to believe that I have no power and no control in the face of temptation, and all my power and control is dependent on the brain. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to separate myself from the brain. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to believe that failure actually exists. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to believe that lack actually exists. I forgive myself that I haven't allowed myself to realize that lack and failure only exist of the mind. I do not accept and allow lack and failure. This is not who I am. I forgive myself to have allowed myself to believe that I have limited resources to control myself. I forgive myself that I haven't allowed myself to realize that the limitation of resources only exists of the mind. I am infinitely stable and constant. I do not accept and allow limitation within me. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to believe that I am subject to limitation. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to believe that limitation actually exists. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to actually believe that I am able to run out of resources. I forgive myself that I haven't allowed myself to realize that only the mind is able to run out of resources. Life is the infinite expression of who I am within, and as one is an equality. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to believe and take into consideration what scientists have to say, because they are apparently more smarter and clever, more intellectual. Scientists who are the mechanics of the mind, they are of the mind. Okay, let's continue this in another video. Excuse me. Okay, cool.